The Bible mentions, with astonishing brevity, that from the expulsion of the first man from Eden until the Great Flood 1,656 years passed. That figure is derived by adding together the ages recorded in Genesis 5. The lifespans of Adam, his son Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and finally the birth of Noah and his sons. Each patriarch fathered his firstborn at an advanced age and lived many years afterward, allowing the bloodline to be followed precisely. Even so, the biblical narrative compresses 16 centuries into a list of names and ages, without describing the landscapes, traditions, or tensions of the era. This austerity contrasts with the frenzy of the first millennia known to archaeology. Over a similar period in our era, humanity moved from the Roman Empire through the Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution. What changes, discoveries, and conflicts might have occurred in those lost years? Scripture's silence invites us to sift through the hints it offers and examine the stories of other cultures to understand why God preferred to summarize that era in a roster of ancestors. Perhaps the minimalist record is, in itself, a warning. There were fascinating achievements, but also transgressions so profound it was better to veil them. The city of Cain. The first indication of antediluvian civilization appears in the story of Cain. After killing his brother Abel, Cain was cursed to wander the earth. Yet soon the text shows him settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden, with a wife and child. The Hebrew word Nod means wandering, suggesting a territory of exiles. In Genesis 4:17, we read that Cain knew his wife, fathered Enoch, and built a city he named after his son. The mention of a city implies more than a few huts. In the ancient Near East, a city was an urban center with planning, walls, division of labor and governance. Where did the inhabitants and knowledge come from to build a city? Early Jewish traditions suggest that Cain may have joined other families descended from Adam not mentioned in Genesis. The text itself says Adam had other sons and daughters, Genesis 5:4. Other commentators raise the possibility of pre-Adamic populations, a controversial hypothesis present in some rabbinic schools. In any case, Cain not only found company, he initiated the first urban settlement in biblical history. Paradoxical for a man condemned to be a wanderer. The narrative continues with a genealogy of his descendants: Irad, Mehujael, Methushael, and Lamech. Lamech is especially noteworthy. He breaks the monogamous pattern by taking two wives, Ada and Zillah, and boasts of his violence in a song to them, Genesis 4:23-24. Lamech presents himself as a multiplied new Cain, but the most revealing aspect is his children's profile. Jabal, son of Ada, is described as father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. The Hebrew expression suggests he developed sophisticated portable architecture for housing herds and clans on the move. Jubal, also Ada's son, is the father of all who play the lyre or flute. He did not invent rudimentary instruments, but established formal music and instrumentation. Tubal-Cain, son of Zillah, is a forger of all sorts of bronze and iron tools. He masters metallurgy and makes weapons. Tubal-Cain's sister, Naamah, is mentioned without description, but Jewish tradition identifies her as inventor of weaving and cosmetics. Here we witness for the first time the emergence of entire disciplines: nomadic architecture, intensive animal husbandry, musical art, metalworking, beauty arts, and warfare. A few verses condense the first industrial revolution. How could a fugitive family inaugurate such advanced crafts in so few generations? Some exegetes argue that human creative ability, not yet fragmented by Babel's dispersion, was extraordinary. Others suggest that Cain and his line received external help, a theme explored in the next section. Who taught Cain? The key to the technological leap appears to lie in mysterious beings mentioned in Genesis 6:2, the sons of God, Bnei Ha-Elohim, who saw the daughters of men and took wives. This episode, situated chronologically just before the flood, but possibly beginning decades or centuries earlier, has generated intense debate. Later, Rabbinic Judaism interpreted the sons of God as nobles or human judges. However, intertestamental writings such as the Book of Enoch identify them as angels. Enoch, a descendant of Seth who walked with God and was taken without seeing death, Genesis 5:24, reportedly received revelations about these entities. The Book of the Watchers, a section of 1st Enoch, recounts that 200 angels called Watchers, Grigori, descended to Mount Hermon, made a pact, and chose to unite with human women. Their leader, Semyaza, feared divine wrath, but all swore to act together. The Watchers introduced forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught metalworking to make swords, knives, shields, and armor. He also instructed women in the use of powders to beautify and seduce. Semyaza revealed spells and magical cuts. Arakiba taught signs of the earth. Akib taught signs of the clouds. Tamiel imparted occult sciences. Asiradel revealed the moon's course, and Shamsil the signs of the sun. Lists vary in different manuscripts, but all agree they imparted a range of disciplines, from astronomy and astrology to metallurgy, chemistry, martial arts, writing, and medicine. Enoch also describes the side effects of these teachings: an explosion of violence, idolatry, and corruption of flesh. The hybrid offspring of Watchers and women, called Nephilim, were giants who devoured what humans produced, and then consumed the humans themselves. The word Nephilim derives from the verb nafal, to fall, and may refer both to fallen angels and their offspring. The biblical text mentions the Nephilim again in Numbers 13:33, when Israelite spies report seeing giants in Canaan. Sons of Anak descended from the Nephilim. Enoch and Jubilees relate that the Nephilim not only were large and violent, but practiced genetic hybridization with animals, producing chimeric creatures. They taught sorcery, astrology, and the science of cutting roots. The New Testament echoes this tradition. 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 1:6 mention angels who did not keep their own domain, but left their proper abode, and were kept in darkness until judgment. Many scholars believe these texts refer precisely to Enoch's Watchers. Thus, both apocryphal literature and parts of canonical scripture recognize that an angelic intervention occurred in humanity's early history that was not sanctioned by God. The forbidden civilization. If we accept that Cain's descendants received instruction from superhuman beings, the technological fervor begins to make sense. Advanced knowledge of metallurgy allowed them to forge bronze and iron simultaneously, something that in secular history occurred centuries apart. Understanding of acoustics made it possible to create instruments that induced mystical states. Astronomy and engineering taught by the Watchers facilitated the construction of megaliths aligned with solstices and equinoxes, temples serving as observatories and spiritual sanctuaries. A civilization combining these fields would have reached what we would call a proto-scientific level. Examining ancient cultures reveals parallel stories. Sumerian king lists say that before the flood, 8 kings reigned tens of thousands of years, ruling antediluvian cities like Eridu and Shuruppak. According to their myths, the Anunnaki descended from the heavens to give laws, writing, and agriculture. Egyptian pyramid texts speak of a primordial era when the gods Neteru ruled and taught humans to build temples aligned with the stars of Orion and Sirius. Ancient Greeks told how the Titans, children of Uranus and Gaia, were overthrown by the Olympians, and that before their fall, they shared knowledge of fire and the arts with humanity. In Mesoamerica, Maya and Aztec traditions recall Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan, feathered serpents who brought the calendar, architecture, and astronomy. The Incas spoke of Viracocha, a bearded man who emerged from the waters and civilized peoples. In India, the Vedas narrate wars between Devas and Asuras involving celestial weapons and flying vehicles called Vimanas. Though names differ, the pattern is similar. Divine or semi-divine beings descend, teach arts and sciences, beget hybrids, and are eventually punished or banished. The Book of Enoch unifies these narratives under the figure of the Watchers. Combining the pieces, the forbidden civilization would have possessed knowledge of mathematics and geometry, as evidenced by the proportions of the Egyptian pyramids and Teotihuacan. Skills in hydraulic engineering, shown by canal systems in Mohenjo-Daro and Caral, and mastery of music as a spiritual tool, present in shamanic chants and Indian raga theory. They also ventured into dark fields such as eugenics and magic. Some interpret the megalithic constructions scattered around the world, Stonehenge in England, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Pumapunku in Bolivia, and Yonaguni in Japan, as remnants of that pre-flood era, built with aid of lost technologies. The precision with which blocks weighing hundreds of tons were cut and fitted without mortar or iron tools suggests they possessed sophisticated methods for softening or molding stone. Researchers speculate about resonance knowledge, acoustic vibrations, or chemical alloys. Whatever the case, these works show that a science and worldview very advanced and different from ours once existed. The judgment of the flood. As the antediluvian civilization prospered, it also sank into corruption. Violence increased not only through war, but through the insatiable appetite of the Nephilim, who devoured everything. Genetic manipulation and magic altered the very structure of life. Idolatry reached levels where men and hybrid creatures worshipped the Watchers as gods. Seeing that all flesh had corrupted its way, God decided to end that stage. It was not merely to punish moral sin, but to preserve the redemptive plan. From the woman's seed, the Messiah was to be born, Genesis 3:15. And if human DNA became irreversibly contaminated, that promise would fail. The flood narrative in Genesis 6:9 is one of the Bible's most detailed passages. God chose Noah, a righteous man, perfect in his generations, a phrase that may allude both to his moral integrity and the purity of his lineage, and ordered him to build an ark. The ark's dimensions, described in cubits, translate to roughly 135 meters long, 22 wide and 13 high, with 3 decks and a long window. Its purpose was to preserve his family and pairs of animals of each species. The flood came when the fountains of the great deep burst forth and the windows of heaven opened. Rain fell for 40 days and nights, but waters covered the earth for 150 days. Scholars think the waters came from torrential precipitation and subterranean eruptions. The idea of a universal flood is not unique to the Bible. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells how the hero Utnapishtim built a boat to escape a flood sent by the gods. Greeks recounted the myth of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who found refuge in a floating chest while Zeus flooded the earth. In Hindu mythology, Vishnu warns Manu of a great deluge and tells him to build a ship to preserve life's seeds. Indigenous American cultures, such as the Hopi, Iroquois, and Maya, also narrate global floods. These convergences point to a common memory of a watery catastrophe that marked a civilizational restart. When the waters receded, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat, modern Turkey or Armenia. Noah waited, sending out a raven and a dove to ensure the ground was dry. His first act on leaving the ark was not to rebuild cities or temples, but to erect an altar and offer sacrifices. God smelled the burnt offering and established a covenant, promising never again to destroy all humanity by flood and giving the rainbow as a sign. Notably, the promise does not exclude other types of judgment. It simply assures that water will not be the global instrument, echoes in culture and warnings for today. Although the flood buried most of antediluvian civilization, fragments of its memory survived. Texts from Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, India, and the Americas contain stories of giants, descending deities, hybridization, and cataclysms. Megalithic constructions worldwide evoke a shared past of sophisticated engineering. Even rabbinic tradition collected stories like that of Og, king of Bashan, described in Deuteronomy as one of the last Rephaim, giants, who according to some midrashim survived the flood by clinging to the ark. The parallel between the days of Noah and the end times, mentioned by Jesus in Matthew 24:37, is striking. Today, humanity is venturing into areas reminiscent of the Watchers' practices. Gene editing tools such as CRISPR allow the alteration of embryos and species. Climate engineering experiments with cloud and aerosol modification. Artificial intelligence aims to create non-human minds that could escape our control. Space exploration seeks contact with extraterrestrial beings. Virtual and augmented reality open digital portals absorbing our consciousness. All this is presented as progress, but without an ethical framework, it could lead to corruption similar to that of old. Parallels also appear in popular culture, films and series glorifying hybrid heroes, ancient gods returning, ancestral technologies and chronicles of lost civilizations. Renewed interest in myths of Atlantis, Lemuria, or Mu reflects a longing for forgotten knowledge. Contemporary spiritual movements speak of contact with star beings and receiving technological revelations. All this suggests that humans remain fascinated by the idea of surpassing natural limits and accessing forbidden knowledge. The central message of the lost years is a warning against pride and unbridled ambition. Cain's civilization achieved great feats, but it was founded on rebellion and deceit. The Watchers exploited human desire for progress to divert worship to themselves. The result was a violent, genetically altered and spiritually corrupted world. In contrast, Noah stands out because he listened to God's voice and chose obedience. He built a vessel when there was no rain and raised an altar before building a city. His humble, reverent attitude becomes a model for our time. This expanded script delves into the story of the 1,656 years between Adam and Noah. It adds details about genealogies and ages, the enigmatic land of Nod, Lamech's wives and children, and their occupations, interpretations of the sons of God, the names and teachings of the Watchers, the Nephilim and their legacy, parallel stories in various cultures, the Ark's dimensions and flood narratives worldwide. It also explores the contemporary implications of these myths, comparing forbidden ancient technologies to modern advances. The result is a richer, more contextualized narrative inviting reflection on the remote past and its echoes in our present.